Ladies and gentlemen, people own properties at the moment and they can't get out to get into something else for a couple of reasons. So we're talking about this morning owning property, wanting to sell it, but you just can't. Let's talk about it now. Stay tuned. Stuck.
Interesting. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. SILJIC. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. Good.
Interesting.
What do you reckon?
Very interesting topic. And I think it's something that's a little bit maybe taboo, that's not being talked about at the moment. It's almost swept a little bit under the rug.
So you own an investment property or you own a property and you would love to either upgrade the property, go to something bigger, go to something different, but you're actually stuck. And you're stuck because when you go to the bank and when you go to get a loan, you get a bit shocked because the last 5, 10, 15, 25 years, a lot of the clients I'm talking with, they've just gotten loans easy because they've got assets, other assets, but suddenly they roll up to the bank and they're actually frozen into the properties they've got. They're forced to love the one they're with.
It's interesting because obviously being a younger demographic myself, I've only seen the landscape for, let's say, the past 7 or 8 years. But like you said then, and speaking to like yourself and other people that are middle-aged in terms of had that more experience, 20 years plus with it, it sounds like previously when you're going to buy a property, and let's say you've got 1 or 2 investment properties or more, if you had the equity behind you, it sounds like you were going to get the loan. They weren't as worried about cash flows. Do you have physically the money behind you?
Well, now there's this responsible lending that since the Royal Commission's been introduced. So what was actually happening is banks and lending institutions would recognize if you had assets, and they said, you know what, if you're willing to make a bid, if you're willing to take the risk, we will take the risk for you. Irrelevant to you not having the strongest income, we can see you've got $1 million in that property equity or $2 million in that property equity. We will lend you a further $1 million, even if your income's not that good. Those days are over, and that's really changed that landscape.
Really interesting, considering so before they were willing to take almost the punt on you because they're like, worst case scenario, we've got the property as security and we can always sell it to get our money back. And now it's that landscape's changed where, like you said, they're more reliant on income. However, and actually Luke made a good point, they raised the rents and buy. But what we're finding is incomes haven't gone up a whole lot over the past few years. And so obviously property prices have gone up a lot. So I think it's really stemmed people's borrowing capacity in terms of what they can do. And there are ways around it, such as putting up your rent and so forth. But it's something that you've just got to be very, very aware of now when you're in that landscape of looking to buy or trade your property.
And look, it's so chronic, rents aren't going to help. Rents aren't going to help some of these landlords, and you know what? It's actually embarrassing for these guys as well. And some people would say, "Look, boo-hoo, like bad luck, sucked in. Stay with the property that you've got." But this was this activity or this this way of life that that people had was they just got really used to it. That as long as they made money with equity, then that could propel them into the next property. Whereas now, it doesn't matter how much money you've made with equity, it's not going to propel you into the next property. Furthermore, if you did make money with equity and you did sell that property, sometimes the banks are saying, yeah, that's great, but what about the year prior? So we can see that you've made the income that year because you've disposed of a property, but yeah, it hasn't been 2 or 3 years of selling properties and that's your fixed income. It's really, really changed for people. And I think even people upgrading their houses, Michael.
Well, And also just back to the point with the investments as well, I think another part of the landscape which people fail to see also sometimes is when you're restricting all this lending, like you said, no one's crying for the big fat rich investor. But by the same token, when you don't have people being able to purchase investment properties, and this is not someone necessarily with a large portfolio of properties, this is just might be like a lot of investment properties in Australia owned by mum and dads who have their family home and they got one investment property. They're far from the richest people in the world, but that's just part of their nest egg for their kids, for themselves. But when you limit people with that as well, it has a flow-on effect to rents. Because what we're finding right now is there's not many investors in the market buying. And from when speaking to our rentals team, right now we have the lowest amount of stock in the market we've ever seen for rents in terms of properties up for rent. And the reason why is I think a large part of it is it's not being stimulated from the investor market, people buying new investments, new properties coming up for rent. People just aren't doing it at the moment. So there's barely a lot less investors out in the market, aka a lot of less rental properties out there, which I think is going to further drive up rents as well. So when people say, we don't care about the big fat investor, well, it does actually affect everyone because a lot of people paying their rents. Funnily enough, this will have a flow-on effect, and I think it's actually going to push rents up quite a bit also.
Well, that's right. I guess it comes down to affordable housing, and if you're not supplying affordable housing, then that's really putting a pressure on certain brackets of the market. So you need a certain amount of investment properties to be available, to be for rent for those guys that are out there. And just to reiterate, we've been the Novak branded business for 20 years has been doing rentals. We actually manage more properties than we ever have, and we actually have the lowest amount of properties for lease ever. So, I think, people are literally just staying within that property. So, Michael, a working example of this, what would be the solution, do you think, to if the big four banks are going to turn around and lending's going to tighten? Lending's tightened, one, because of the Royal Commission. Lending's tightened, two, because of the interest rate. The rate of assessment has changed for a purchaser to buy something because the interest rate thresholds are higher now. Is there any reprieve or solution to this, or what can people actually do? Because go out and get another job, get a third job, change your job. Like, what do you do if you want to keep up on this investment cycle? Rick, because it seems like these guys that are missing out on buying a property, it's by a long shot. It's not just by putting rents up or a 5% yield or a 7% yield on the property. It's by a long shot that they're not being able to buy it. What do people do?
Great question. If there was one simple answer, then I think there'll be a lot of people making a lot of money. There might be, but it stems back to one thing: cash flow. So Luke says, what do you do? Have patience. Exactly. You got to sit where you are at the moment.
I love that.
It's true. Property is the long-term game. You got to ride out the wave through the good times and the bad times. But I think at the moment, the bottom line is, and you can spell it out a couple of different ways, but it's cash flow. If you have cash flow, you can do what you need to do. If you do not have the adequate cash flow, you cannot do what you need to do. So working backwards from that, like you said, does it mean A, you go get another job? Does it mean B, you work with your property manager and go, okay, are all my rents at market rent at the moment? Are there expenses that I'm unnecessarily spending on? You literally got to, run everything out on the spreadsheet, work out where all the money is coming in, where it's all going out, and really fine tune that. And then the second part of it is you've got to factor this into the properties that you're buying. So traditionally, maybe someone who was doing quite well buying investment houses around the northern beaches going, look, the yield's pretty bad, but it's fine because obviously houses have performed very strongly with capital growth. So we're going to keep buying houses, make a lot of money that way. At the moment, with all the land tax you're paying with higher interest rates, the cash flow's not there. The bank might not lend it to you. Change your investment strategy. You might go for maybe one-bedroom apartments with a much higher yield, a much higher cash flow that allows you to be able to service that loan and still buy the property. I think you've got to pivot.
You got to be a cash flow porn star.
You got to pivot your strategy, I think.
you got to be a cash flow porn star, because equity is no good. Everyone's got equity at the moment built into their property. It's been a wonderful property market. It's been a good 10 years. Over the last 10 years, everyone's built equity in. But if you haven't built in the big message out of today is, if you haven't built in cash flow into that same model, which is your model, you're simply not going to be able to continue that path of upgrading your properties, whether they're investment or whether they're living. You will choke because of cash flow. And Michael, a really uncomfortable topic, which this is for some people around the barbecue, they're not going to talk with friends or family about it, is open banking. Do you want to explain that?
So my understanding of open banking is, previously when you go to get a loan, you go through your broker. Cash flow points. Luke's comment there. So previously when you go to get a loan, you go through a broker. You give them all your financial information, and then they go forward to the bank and they put forward the best application possible to try and obviously win you the loan for as much as possible, for as cheap as possible. Now with open banking, there's no more hiding behind closed doors with your applications. Everyone can see all of your financial information between all the banks, which once again means that people, I think, have been held back even more in terms of what they can loan. And it's not a bad thing. Like, I think it's good that all the information's out there and people are going to now live within their means and they're not going to borrow money they should be allowed to borrow. But it's something to be aware of, because the bottom line is, chances are now you're going to be able to borrow less than what you can before, because all your financial information's out there for the banks to see in terms of credit cards, this, that, loans, debts, everything.
And that's, I think it's a double ganger. It's twice as hard, because that lending side of things, that cash flow sort of things, is from the Royal Commission tightened up. But that's on the left side. But then on the right side, where people, the honesty system of lending is the transparency between a lender and a customer, is huge. So you can just see the banks have razor sharp vision on their customers now, which they never ever had before. Quite simple. You could say, I don't have a credit card, and the bank would say, okay. They cannot do that anymore. Credit cards will smash your lending. And as soon as they do, with open banking, as soon as you make the application, it is visible which credit cards you have and how much you have outstanding on them in terms of credit available. Loans are the same thing. Believe it or not, I remember starting in real estate, and I remember someone I used to work with never used to tell the bank they had any loans.
Wow.
Right? No loans. Open banking, you cannot do that. The CRA first, the Credit Reference Australia, started where they started registering loans. If you applied, that was huge. That started 15 odd years ago, 20 odd years ago, and now on top of that, open banking started. So it's changed. The lending has changed the coalface. I will go as far to say that it's not about property anymore. It's about finance. It used to be about property. It used to be about leveraging that property, leveraging that rent, buying that next property. The deal and the catalyst is now finance for people, because the degree of difficulty to purchase a property, all of the difficulty sits in lending. It doesn't sit in what am I going to buy and what am I going to sell or what am I going to rent any longer. That's off the table.
Yeah, I agree. And bear in mind, everyone, as well, this is not just a uniform just for only big investors with multiple properties. This affects everyone. So this is, if you're living in your family home and you want to upsize your home, the principles still apply. Same principles apply. You want to buy your first investment property, you want to buy your first property. All these principles apply to everyone.
Yep. The art of real estate is finance.
Yeah.
At the moment. And Michael, I don't think it's going to change. There's going to be much relief. Any like these changes were a long time coming changes. So
Correct.
to go the other way, it's going to be a
No.
long time coming.
I think this is the landscape for the foreseeable future. And once again, it's not all doom and gloom with it. It's just understanding, like what we've unpacked today, understanding what the landscape is, so you can best use it to your advantage in your situation. The more you understand, the more informed decisions you can make.
And you're not alone. Yeah, everyone is going through this. So I think I know I've certainly spoke to a couple of people, older people. They just have a sore head and they feel like a leper that the banks won't touch them. And it's like, no, it's cool. It's happening to everyone. Oh, is it? Oh, okay. So I think it's interesting talking about it on air today because it's not a comfortable topic. We want to surface at a barbecue. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, you said it before. It is a pride thing, like as well. Like someone that maybe has done quite well financially over the years and has been in a strong position. Then you're not going to go tell your friends at barbecue, oh, I've owned all these properties yet no one's giving me a loan at the moment. And they go, oh, something must be wrong. Something must be wrong with your situation. So it is an uncomfortable topic.
It never used to be a topic you used to have because you could, if you had the asset, which everyone does, off you go to the next one. You can borrow on that. So The world's changed, Michael. Have a great day.
Thank you. Interesting topic today. Good.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going to go though. Well, Lisa's got to say something.
Get a great broker. We work with the best.
Yeah.
It's true. We do have some great brokers.
Great broker makes such a difference. Great lawyer, such a difference. Great agent, such a difference. So,
interesting.
Legend. Have a good day and go get him. Hopefully, the sun's going to come out.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
See you, mate. Bye.